Hi, Yulia.
你好。
Thank you very much for giving all of us this opportunity to share your personal experiences and thoughts. Shall we start by talking about your upbringing and experiences? For example, where you were born, your education and career background.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your channel. I truly appreciate that. I was born in former Soviet Union. It's been in Kazakhstan. Now it's a different country. Back then, everything was united. So I was born into a military family. My father was an Air Force engineer. I went to school, elementary school and middle school in Kazakhstan, and then we moved to central Russia, Samara city, which is kind of right in the middle. It's south of Moscow on the River Volga. It's very beautiful. Actually, living here in Hudson Valley reminds me of my hometown in Samara, where I spent most of my life. And then I graduated high school there, and then I went to technical school there. I studied engineering, and I worked in many different jobs. It was when I was young in Russia, and I did the secretarial work. I worked for different companies, gas and oil. When I was in Russia, when I was growing up, I hated schools. I hated daycare. I hated schools. And I think because I was like, we were the last generation that was growing up in a communist sort of strict environment back at that time. And I think I was in the fourth grade, and it was the time when you become the pioneer, right? So this whole ritual of becoming a pioneer and joining a pioneer organization is like a elementary level of Communist Party. And we were in trouble. We did something. A small group of us. We did something, and then the teacher came in and she said that you guys are not going to go to the square, and you're not going to join pioneer organization. And I remember that feeling. It's like, wow, we're like the outcasts, like we're not being accepted in. We did something horrible back then. And so this is growing up at that, in that environment. Now, looking back, I realized it was just very traumatizing because people had to do what they had to do, but they didn't have a heart for it. So children not always was treated nicely. And, like I remember I was very active and very curious kid. And that was not encouraged. You had to sort of blend in, and it was constantly, the message was, don't stick out, be like everybody else. Don't tell everyone, what you have, or, your strengths and all that. Don't show it to people. Just try to be gray and just blend in. And I had a hard time with that because I always stick out whether I wanted it or not. And so for me, it was very difficult.
So, if I may interrupt, you didn't have this freedom of thought back then.
That's right. That's right. Again, my parents were working for the Communist Party. So that was even more strict than maybe other families. It was a lot of competition because I was in the military base. So it was a lot of competition among kids, or my father's a general, or my father is a major, or, all these things. So there's kind of like pressure, like the parents' status. That was a big thing because then they get more benefits, and therefore they're entitled to behave a little naughtier than other kids. My parents had to leave very early in the morning. It was, 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, and they were gone. So before they taught me how to go to school by myself. It was kind of like this little military child, They teach you everything. So they teach you how to get ready and go to school, and I had to walk to school. It wasn't too far, but, still you're a little kid, like first grade, second grade, third grade, and you have to go by yourself. And then when you come back, you'll find a list of chores on the refrigerator, all the things you had to do. So you all, again, by yourself, because your parents are still working. They're still at the base. I didn't really see my parents that much, and I always felt abandoned, like alone, and there was no one to support me. So often, as a result, I got in trouble. And then I was severely punished because I was supposed to be, as a child of a military officer, I had to behave a certain way, and I did not. So that was not encouraged, and I was severely punished often. And then so there was also no guidance as far as, well, how are you supposed to behave? When I was 15 years old, my father and my mother, we were sitting on the balcony having tea in a nice spring day. And my mother told me a story. It was a story when she was in her 20s, and she was working as a secretary for a military base. She said that during a lunchtime, all the secretaries will get together, and, you know, women, they'll either go for lunch, or maybe they'll get a haircut, or maybe they'll do some other things together. And one time they decided to go and get a haircut. And as they were talking, the general secretary said that, you know, there's a new batch of officers just graduated from academy, and they're coming to our base, you know. And the women, they kind of giggle about it and excited about it. It's fun. New faces, new energy. And so that was it. And then she went back to her office to find out, you know, KGB agents are waiting for her there. And then they put her in a room, separate room, and they start questioning her as to where she got the information about this new batch of officers coming to the base. And she says, well, it was just casually shared by the general secretary, so I'm assuming it's not classified information. And they said, well, maybe it was your husband who told you that. So she started defending it. She says, no, it wasn't my husband, and I haven't actually seen him for a couple of weeks. And so they insisted that she would spy on her husband, because he might have, tell her that information. Mind you, I'm 15 years old. And my mother is telling me this story. And that just tells you the relationship, you know, of the family unit. And I'm thinking, you know, it took me a long time to actually process that and look back and thinking, wow, how is it possible? My mother is telling this story in front of my father. Whoever said no to KGB? You tell me. No one, right? Because you just don't say it, because there's consequences. If they're not going to put you in jail, there's going to be other consequences. You fire you or whatever. So that is like this twisted dynamics in the family, right? And then, so if you take it to a large scheme about whole society, it's even, you know, like it's even worse.
In Russia, did people still have some degree of freedom of belief?
After perestroika, after 1993. Before that, no. And so I didn't know anything about religion. I was brought up as an atheist. I had no spiritual beliefs whatsoever. Didn't know anything about that. And I think the first time actually I've heard about it, so I was 16 years old, and then my little sister was born. And about a year later, it was epidemic of salmonella, and it was throughout the whole entire city. And a lot of kids were dying. And so my sister got sick, and she was about years old. And so that was the first time when my mother turned to my father and she says, I don't care what you believe in. I want you to go to church, and I want you to get on your knees, and I want you to pray to God that our daughter survives this. And that was the first time I've heard about God and praying and all these things. And I thought, wow, what a strange concept. And so my father did that. He went to church and he prayed, and my sister actually recovered. She came back, so that was, good thing. And then from that point, periodically I would see magazines about Christianity or explaining Christianity. Mm-hmm. And I would read them and I'm like, wow, what's this? But I didn't really understand it fully. So then I was 19 years old. I went to visit my grandparents, and they told me this story about how they tried to baptize me. And then they couldn't. So, and I thought, oh, well, I'm 19 now, and the country back then was start to open up. I thought, okay, I'll just go by myself. And so I went to church, local church there, and then I got baptized into Russian Orthodox. However, it didn't really mean much to me except for like the baptism on the surface, because I didn't understand the concept of Christianity, that one is to read the Bible that transforms you. It was more about going to church, burning candles, kowtow to the icons, and celebrating like Easter or other Orthodox holidays, and that was it. So I had the Bible. My grandma gave me a Bible, but I never read it. So I just had it, traveling all over. And for me, it was kind of almost like, well, I want good things in life, so let me pray, and then they'll come. It was kind of like almost using the prayer in a way to ask for things that I wanted in this life. So I didn't really understand fully what religion was all about, or what spirituality was about. But I was always curious. And I was always looking for, there's something bigger, and I don't think I am that simple. There's something bigger, some more meaningful to life, but I didn't know what it was. And for my generation, because we were the generation of when the perestroika happened, so the whole Soviet Union collapsed, the whole infrastructure collapsed, and everything was just upside down. The banks, there was a recession. Like my family had some savings, we lost it all. My father had to work 5 jobs. I had to help him. We had no food. He had to, grow, this is 21st century we're talking about. He had to grow rabbits on the balcony. So we had meat for, to feed the family. And it was, kind of traumatizing because there are going to be little guys running around in your living room. My sister will play with them. And then next thing you know, they grow up a little bit and they become your dinner, After that, I became vegetarian, couldn't eat meat for a long time because it was just too much. Because the Soviet Union collapsed, so we had this little hope like, oh, the country would be different. Maybe there would be freedom and freedom of speech and freedom of choice and all these things. But what happened is, police became mafia, mafia became police. Things just kind of like changed the label on the door, but the systems remained the same. So, and people's mentality was kind of the same because they never really seen anything different. So they didn't know what different lifestyle is out there. And so it kind of just changed the label, but everything remained the same.
And how did you end up in the United States?
When I came here, to make it long story short, I came to United States in 1998. So it's been 24 years now. The main reason why I came to United States was because I wanted to escape communism, and I wanted to live a life that is free and authentic, even though I didn't understand full concept of it back then.
To the United States is very fortunate.
Yeah, very lucky. Very lucky, yeah. When I came here and I thought, wow, these people in America, they have no idea how lucky they are because they live, you could be homeschooled, you can go to private school, you can go to public school, you can choose extracurricular activities. And you can learn a lot of things if you really want to. And then there's the world of YouTube and the world of other, websites and media where you can learn extra things that you're interested in. We didn't have that. I didn't have that when I was growing up in Russia. It was world was pretty black and white. And I had a really hard time to fit in that world. I can say that my life in America wasn't easy. It was pretty hard. I went through a lot of challenges here. And I actually went through a lot of challenges before I even came here. When I was going through the examination, in order for you to come to this country, you have to go through medical examination. And so when they did the exam, I found out for the first time that I had a thyroid disease, and it was pretty severe. And they told me that I have to have an operation and will be probably on medications for the rest of my life. And I was 24, I was really scared. So I called my mother and I said, well, is it really a good time for me to go to America? And she says, well, it's the best country in the world where you can go and get, medical treatment or medical help. So I didn't cancel my plans and decided to still go and continue with my plans to come in here. And when I was here, I went to a hospital, and so they told me that my condition was pretty severe, and they had to, it was an overactive thyroid, and what that means is your immune system is attacking your body and, basically just grinding away at your bone structure. And I was very fatigued all the time. I had very little energy. I had to take naps during the day because I couldn't function. It was kind of like a life of a sprinter. You wake up, you have a little bit of energy, then you run and you do things, and then you're like exhausted, and then you have to take a nap or meditate or something, and then you do the same thing in the evening, and then you got exhausted again. So I've tried different things. I've tried different therapy, and it didn't really help. And then the doctors were pretty insistent that I had to have an operation and I had to take pills for the rest of my life. And this whole concept was pretty scary for me because I always considered myself pretty healthy. I was in sports all my life. Growing up in Russia, former Soviet Union, everybody was in gymnastics or ballet. So I was in gymnastics and I was in athletics, and I was always running, playing volleyball and doing all these things. And all of a sudden my health was in question. So that was a big turning point for me to start looking for alternatives. And back then there wasn't really much. So I was taking a lot of vitamins. My whole counter in the kitchen was all these different vitamins for all these different things. And I remember I was taking a lot of it. And I was drinking, basically living on coffee. So that was cream, sugar, and coffee so that I can have energy to do things that I need to do. Plus when I came to this country, I barely spoke any English, so it was very stressful. And I'm not one of those people that, who learn academically. So I'm more artistic, and for me it was kind of like children learn, You say something, I repeat it. I don't know what you're saying, but I repeat it, and then eventually I understand what's being said. And I think I went to I was in small town in the state of Wisconsin, and the local school was offering like a free classes for immigrants. So I came there and I was studying English, and it did not work for me because I couldn't understand, and the this methodical way just didn't sink in my mind. So what I did instead, then I said, forget it. I'll just learn how children learn. And I just got random books. I signed up for random classes at the local technical school. I remember it was a class of psychology, economics, creative writing, and African dance. And I've just decided to completely immerse myself into, all these classes. And I remember sitting every night with big dictionary and reading these books and having no idea what I'm reading, translating word for word. And when I had conversations with my friends, I would write things in advance and I memorized them. So shortly after, when I came to America, I was here for, I think, like 6 months, and I got working visa. And so I had to memorize the whole script because I knew the job inside out, but I just didn't have the language. So I had to memorize everything, how to go through interview. And miraculously, I got the job. It was a administrative assistant for human resource manager. I mean, imagine I'm here barely speaking any English, in a small town in the middle of nowhere in Wisconsin. I get this job in the bank. But I think the reason was because the vice president, she was world travel woman. And so she was kind of curious about me, and she took me in, basically helped me with, to get a job. And so I remember I would sit there sometimes and stare at the phone and think, just don't ring, because on the phone it's so hard to understand what people are saying. When they come and talk to you in person, it's so much easier. You can use your hands, you can use your body language, and then you get the general idea. So it was easy to communicate with me. But it was kind of like a school of hard knocks, for a year. I read a lot of books, and I was basically speaking language without knowing what I'm saying and all these things. And in about a year, I started actually speaking fluently. That was kind of like was an interesting experience for me, because I was determined to assimilate and become like all the Americans, and speak the language fluently and understand the person next to me. I've been here for, I think, maybe like 5 years, and I always like art. I started looking into art, and I think it was sort of, for me, it was part of my like a therapy in a way, to overcome whatever it is, because it's the only thing I can control. So since I was a little kid, I like to doodle, and I had the Play-Dohs. I like to do things with Play-Doh. So when I was here for about 5 years, I've decided to go, it was a fair. It was an art fair. And I went there, and then I was talking to this nice lady, and I said, well, I really want to learn how to do landscapes or photography. And I didn't have the skills, but I have these pictures in my mind, like how I want it to look. And she says, why don't you consider going to the college? And there's an art college right down the road. And that was it. So I've decided, okay, I'll go to art college. And I did. I signed up for a 4-year program. I took painting, drawing, and ceramics, like a sculpture class. It was really great. I'm glad that I went through that experience. I have a bachelor in fine arts now. Anyways, and when I graduated, I was so proud of myself.
What led you to practice Falun Gong?
I was looking for a part-time job, and I decided to go to that store, and it turned out to be open, and the owners were there, and they were opening up a cafe. And I said, well, I worked in the retail before. I'm looking for a part-time job, and I'd like to work there. And they said, oh yeah, sure, absolutely. So I was hired as a store manager. I worked there. And the owner practiced meditation of Falun Dafa. And so when I start working at this store, so the owner introduced me to Falun Dafa. Then I remember I came home and I thought, I don't want to do it. I'm not interested.
In other words, you are still an atheist.
You can say that, yes. So then I talked to a friend of mine, and she says, Yulia, you're in America now. You can't do it like that. You have to do it this way. You go, because the owner asked me to come to meditate, and I didn't want to do it. And she says, you just go there 3 times. You go 3 times, and then you say, I don't really like it. And then you don't come again. And I said, okay, but I don't want to go by myself. So I call all my friends, and there's a big group of us, and we came, and she had the practice site at the store. So we came 3 times, and I was the only one who was, stick around to practice meditation. Mm-hmm. And the reason being is that within a month, the transformation was amazing. The reason why I entered the practice was because of my health, as I said. Yes. And I was looking.
You were ill.
Yes, I was looking for an alternative way to heal my thyroid, and I wanted to feel better. Mm-hmm. And basically, my whole life is just like a counter of, pills and vitamins and cream, sugar, and coffee. That's all I was running on, and I don't think it was very healthy, and I don't think it was very helpful either. And I was. How old was I? I was 37, I believe. 37 at that time. So within a month, it's like somebody lifted all that heaviness, and I felt so light and healthy, and I forgot what it feels like to be healthy. Mm-hmm. I think I felt this way when I was a kid last time. It was amazing. It was just amazing. I had so much energy. I didn't know what to do with myself. I wouldn't need any naps, and I just felt happy. Mm-hmm. Like it was just, I realized that when people have terminal illnesses or like long-term illnesses, it just really weighs on you. But you don't notice it because you just live like that. So then it's sort of difficult existence in a way. So when I got healthier, I felt so happy. I had a lot of energy. I can accomplish a lot of things. And I was running around from morning till night, and I had no problem. But that was one part of it. I think the major part I've discovered later. So through practicing Falun Dafa, I quit cream, coffee, sugar. I used to smoke. I smoked for 22 years because everybody smoked in Russia. So yeah, I smoked. And I remember having conversations with my mother, and she says, I can just see you going, dying with this cigarette in your mouth, and because everybody smoked, so you're so addicted to it. I think it was like one thing, it was really hard for me to quit. And I was looking for ways to quit. I had a patch, I had tried the different techniques and different things, and none worked. Mm-hmm. When I start practicing Falun Dafa, it wasn't easy. I think it took about 2 years, and I quit smoking, and it was natural. It's just like one day I woke up and I didn't want to smoke anymore. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. Like, it's all I remember. I used to, like, in the morning, I wake up, I open my eyes, I turn on the coffee, and I go outside, smoke a cigarette. First thing. And then, I smoke a pack a day. And so I was pretty addicted. And all of a sudden, like within 2 years, it just went away. And then I felt so, it just felt so great. It's such a terrible habit. It smells bad, it makes you feel tired, and your skin is really old, it damages your skin very much, and your hair. And I remember I used to get upset when my friends would make a comment, oh, you smell so bad. And I'll be like, but that's how we lived in Soviet Union. So everybody smoked. Like, I went to work, we smoked. My manager, I remember he would say, I don't need you to leave your desk. So if you need to smoke here, you smoke right in your office. So I smoked in my office. We smoked everywhere, at home, everywhere. Now it's such a foreign concept. But back then, that's what it was. So I quit smoking, I quit drinking. And then within a couple months, at the beginning of practicing Falun Dafa, I just didn't feel like I needed anymore to take all these pills and vitamins and all the things that all kinds of, mixtures and medical things that I would, create for myself to feel better. I stopped taking all of that. And I felt better than I felt when I was 20 years old. It was the first, it was a really major transformation for me.
So, besides the physical changes, does practicing Falun Gong have any other impact on your life?
But what followed was even more transformative. But it didn't happen quickly. It happened over a span of about, I think, 10 years. Because Falun Dafa is the practice of mind and body. And so the main text of Falun Dafa, John Falun, that talks about truthfulness, compassion, tolerance, which are the universal principles that we follow in practice. And so, as I read the book over and over, I start to understand more and more about human nature, about who we are, about our relationship with the world and with other people. And it sounds easy, it's, truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, but practicing daily is the hardest thing for me so far. And the reason being is that because I realized that my foundation, especially growing up in the communist Soviet Union, was false, and it was not true. So a lot of concepts that I've acquired through schooling or through family or society, they were kind of distorted. It's more about selfishness and a lot of judgment. It's kind of deceit and jealousy and all these things. I think after maybe 5 or 7 years, I begin to realize, there might be something wrong with my values. Even though I read the book every day and tried my best to apply the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance to my daily routine, I still couldn't really conform. And what I understood is that I had a lot of notions I had to discard that I've acquired in my homeland, about just, about marriage, about family, about children, about money, about businesses, being honest, and all these, all these things. And about 4 years ago, big transformation happened for me. I've been cultivating for quite some time, but all of a sudden, as these little things come off, and then I realize, this is not a very good notion, or this is not a good thought. I'm not being compassionate, or I'm not being really honest or very open. Like I would like to be, but I'm not. I wasn't there, right? Mm-hmm. And so about 4 years ago, big change happened, and I feel it's almost like all these avatars I've created. This avatar is for work, and this avatar is for family, and this avatar is for friends, and I'm behaving this way with these people and that people, to really just to protect myself and not experience pain or trauma as I have back in Russia. I think then they all collapsed. Every single avatar collapsed. In all these entities that were created, they all collapsed. And I kind of felt naked and uncomfortable at first. But then over time, I became more authentic, because now it was me learning the right way of being in the world and in this body, at work and with my friends. So I don't have to pretend anymore. Mm-hmm. I don't have to be a certain way in certain places. It was just me, and that was the same me everywhere I went. And it was kind of hard because I'm not young, and so it's like you have to face yourself and realize, like, wow, all these things I believed that was me, it was actually not me. And now I yet to find out who me is and learn the right way, the good way of being in the world. And so it was kind of humbling. It was a very humbling experience. And I'm glad that happened. And it happened because of Falun, because I read the teachings of Falun over and over again. And that sort of dispelled the illusion of all the things that have been put in kind of like container, since childhood, about everything. And so I start questioning everything, and it's for the first time, and kind of, it was really liberating, because it gave me freedom. It really gave me the true freedom. I don't know how to explain it. It's hard to explain this concept, but it's like, it's really you, and there's no need to pretend ever.
That is, when you were reading June Falun. Before you stepped into Falun Gong, you had contact with Western religions. In Western religions, you didn't feel this kind of freedom. So what is the biggest difference between Falun Gong and Western religions?
I think the bigger difference is, even though I thought I was practicing as a Russian Orthodox. As I said, it was more about rituals. I never read the Bible. I didn't know any concepts of, scriptures, any of that, any stories. I had no idea. So, because it was another kind of lie by the Communist Party in Russia, when the perestroika happened, they said, yes, churches are open now, you can go to churches. But people were not explained, like, what this for. It's like you can go and do all these, rituals, burn candles and do all these things and ask for forgiveness and all this stuff, but you don't understand the very foundation of why you're doing this. What is it for? So I considered myself for several years Russian Orthodox. Meanwhile, I was still looking for as I said, there's more to life than that. I was looking for a meaning and I couldn't find it. So I was trying different meditations. I was doing yoga for 8 years. I was trying different practices, spiritual practices. The problem with that was always, I would get very excited about it, and then I would, study the teachings or go with the group or, do whatever we were into. But then it would kind of hit the plateau. Just sort of know this much and that's it. There's no more to know. And so then I'll be on the next thing, different meditation or a different practice or reading different books, going with a different group and, all these things. And when I found Falun Dafa, and I read a book for the first time, and it answered all my questions that I had. And then I read it again, and they answered even more questions. And then I read the third time, and I couldn't put it down anymore because I realized I have something very, very precious, and there's no limit to it. I can study this book forever. I can study it every day. I can read it 5 times a day if I want to. And I always find I learn something new. I learn new truths. I enlighten to things. And there's like infinite amount of wisdom in this book that has been guiding me to become a better person, and then better person to myself, and then better person to people around me, become more compassionate, not like kind or anything, but actually compassionate, so that, like there's this concept I think I learned from a traditional Chinese culture as I embarked with the Falun Dafa meditation. I started watching a lot of, reading a lot about traditional Chinese culture, or looking into the materials that had information about the arts and different characters and philosophies and all these things, because all of a sudden I realized this world exists and I had no idea it existed there. I've never studied, a little bit. I've studied art history in college, but that was it. I never looked into it. And then all of a sudden I realized, wow, the traditional Chinese culture has so much wisdom, but it's not a surface thing. It's kind of like the more you delve into it, the more you understand, wow, it's not a simple culture as it seems on the surface. It has, there's no limit to wisdom. You can study all your life. You can spend many lives studying, and you will always enlighten to something new. There's so much wisdom in that book. And I could not find any other practice. And I've tried many, many different, as I said, practices. I couldn't find anything, not even close to that. So when I read the book, I think 3 times, then a friend of mine, who's the owner of the store, and she came and she brought a box. of all the lectures, additional lectures that Master Lee, who is the founder of Falun Dafa, published. And she had it all printed out, and she there's like a big box, and then she gave it to me. She says, here's all the additional lectures if you want to read it. And I remember I completely I closed my doors for 3 months, and I read and read and read and read, and I couldn't stop because I knew I finally found it. I've been looking for that all my life. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I was looking for something that would explain to me who I am, the meaning of life, why suffering, why people go through what they go through, and how to deal with that. And I guess one of the biggest concepts I learned from reading these lectures is that oftentimes, as I'm speaking for myself, if you have difficult situations, there's a tendency to have resentment, be angry about situation, not accept it, and then carry that through your life. So with Falun Dafa, I understood that, wow, there's a different way of being, is that life is unfair. Life is difficult and life is unfair. And there's no explanation to that. It's just what it is. And doesn't matter what layer of society you're in, but through studying Falun Dafa teachings, it helped me to not have this attitude, oh, it's unfair. Why is this happening to me? What I gain is understanding. And that gives you like this inner freedom where you can forbear the situation, whatever that comes, and have a compassion for the person who may have offended you, and not be angry at them or not carry resentment, and forgive them for the sake of yourself and for the sake of that person and all the people who are involved. And that was a big thing, because I grew up where my parents were always looking for who's guilty, who's at fault, whose fault it is. Okay, that person. So we should blame them. They're a bad guy.
It's the same in China.
Yeah. Yes. So, and I lived like that. I didn't realize that, but that concept had a really bad effect on my health, because then you put in all these resentment into yourself, like it's stuffing in, and then you carry it around, and actually I believe that it can make you sick because there's so much poison. So on contrary, Falun Dafa teaches one to look within, which was also a foreign concept for me. Like, wait, he did something to me and it was pretty bad. Why do I have to look within? But when you do, you realize like, well, maybe that happened to me because I have done similar things, or I have similar beliefs, or I need to improve. So the focus, and it's kind of like one of those things, you can only control yourself, right? Well, so we cannot control other people. We cannot change other people either. And that is actually very powerful, because then you can control yourself. So the world can be chaotic. It could be any way it is. And yet you retain this solid feeling of being calm and collected and rational, and do things not based on your emotions, but on what is right. This is another concept that was foreign to me. Like, if somebody does something bad to you, the initial, like a knee-jerk reaction would be, oh, you did something bad to me. Oh, let me get you back, right? But Falun Dafa teaches you, no, you can't. Like, it's not righteous way. It's not a virtuous way to be. You look within, you find your own shortcomings, and then you forgive that person. And if you need to endure, you just endure. And through this process, I've learned that I became a better person. I have more tolerance, No one is perfect, including myself, right? We all have shortcomings. And it gives you such a big just sense of humility. Like you understand that everybody's suffering, and maybe this person did this thing to you not because they're happy, because they have some trouble in their life, and you should be more compassionate. Oh, that's very liberating, because then you have a power. You have the power to you control your own reaction.
Wow, so inspired. I heard that many people who practice Falun Gong have some extraordinary experiences, such as seeing things that others can't see, feeling things that others can't feel. Have you had any experiences like this?
Oh yeah, of course I did. Back in Russia, my family, actually, my father, my sister, and I, we were very supernatural in the sense that I remember my father was trying different kind of qigong, and then he'll tell us some stories. He would do some travels or something in different spaces. My sister was, I think they found a gold bladder stone in her stomach, and my mom told her, she says, just, pretend like you turning this stone into a sand, and it disappears, and with your hand. And she did that within the month, and it just completely was gone. So we had this supernatural experience growing up. But when I started practicing Falun Dafa, I remember the very first supernatural experience was when I was standing in standing stance meditation. I think it was like a second day doing that meditation. And I remember it was very, like, my arms were really sore. And I was looking at everybody, how they're doing it. And they were like, oh, this is really difficult. And I was trying to relax into the pose and just not think about it. And so finally, I kind of relaxed, and I closed my eyes, and all of a sudden I see eyes everywhere. They're looking at me, and I thought, wow, what's going on? Like, what's happening? Like, I'm, big magnifying glass in the eyes, and then they're all looking at me meditating. And I thought, wow, this is really strange. And then I read it in John Falun, that explains why is that happening, is that my third eye was actually open, and I can see a lot of things. When I was meditating, Shenyun Performing Arts came to Milwaukee, and it was I started practicing in November, and then the show was in April. So I was just brand new practitioner. And that morning I was planning, so we were planning as a family to go to see the show. And in the morning I was meditating. I was in doing meditation. And as I said in meditation, I was undergoing a state of I was in very deep ding. So I just relaxed into meditation, and my whole body felt very comfortable. And all of a sudden I see with my Tiamu, with my third eye, like I'm above downtown Milwaukee, in the sky, in the clouds. And then there's like little walkway goes into the heavens. And I'm about 5 years old.
Are you sure this isn't an illusion?
No, it's not illusion. I saw it very clearly. It was very clear. It's like you and I talking. No, it was not even like, you're not like in the dream or anything. Yeah, it was just very real. Mm-hmm. And so I was 5 years old, and then beside me was this huge lion, real lion. And then I looked at it and I thought, wow, this big lion is kind of friendly. And then I thought, wow, this is really unusual. And so a lion and I were going up, right, into the heavens. And there's a very tiny like stairways going up. And then I looked down and I saw the downtown theater where Shenyun Performing Arts was about to have a show. And it was under this kind of glass dome. And the dragons, like hundreds of dragons of every color, were flying over. And it was kind of like they were looking down to see, but they weren't really aggressive or, like they were friendly. And so they're just there to watch, sort of. And I thought, wow, I had never seen anything like that. Another supernatural experience, I guess, to see the show in Madison, Wisconsin. So, and it was, I believe it was kind of anniversary. And so I've decided to get like really nice seats right in the front. And so one of the soprano came out to sing. And as she started singing, like the golden light came out from her mouth and it filled the whole entire theater. Everything was gold. It just filled out the whole entire space. And I felt like I was in a different dimension. The light sort of went through me and I can see myself being particleized. So the molecules, atoms, protons, all these, it's like a sand. I was not solid anymore. And this light went through everything, collected the dark matter, and then just took it back into the back theater and out into the space. And I understood that was the Communist Party culture that was in me was taken out. It's just removed, part of it at least. And it was pretty dark, like pretty black, yeah. So that was another supernatural experience.
有意思。
It's interesting. You just said that, after practicing Falun Gong, you have a better understanding and more interest in Chinese traditional culture. Have you been to China?
No, it's interesting you asked that because someday I'd like to go to China. I believe right now is not a good time to go to China. But I would love to go there one day when the China is free and open. I'd love to go. When I learned about Falun Dafa, I was throughout the years as I went on, I realized that it's so the traditional Chinese culture, not the communist culture, but the traditional Chinese culture is just so incredible. And I've never learned about it. My growing up in former Soviet Union, the only thing I saw is the flea markets full of Chinese selling cheap things, and then there was like, never buy them because they break and they won't last long, So my mother used to have a saying, we're not so wealthy to buy cheap things, So anyways, and to me, that was Chinese culture. That's all I was acquired, that's all I knew about it. But through Falun Dafa, what I learned is there's a whole different dimension to this culture. The tradition, the philosophies, the way of being and thinking and existing in the world is just so deep, and it's simple, but yet there's such a depth to it. I actually was so inspired by that. I started learning recently Chinese language, and I learned a lot of my goal is to read John Falun one day in Chinese fluently.
This is a very big goal.
Yes. And I'd like to go to China, instead of going to China right now, I might go to Taiwan to try, to just emerge sort of, in the culture and learn the language. I think that would help me a lot with language. And, what we do is our teacher teaches us the traditional Chinese characters versus the simplified characters that were invented by Communist Party, but and then each character has so many layers of meaning that, like when I read, I have a book and it's pinyin, and then there's all these there's one character and it's 5, 6, meanings that it could carry. So just through this, I'm beginning to understand how, immense the traditional Chinese culture is.
Wish you to achieve your ideas soon. One day go to China to take a look. China is indeed a very beautiful country.
Yeah, I would like to do that.
Yulia, your talk today has been incredibly enlightening for me. It has helped me understand a lot, the commonalities between cultures. Thank you very much for taking the time to share with us your personal experiences. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.